Thank you so much for coming back after that amazing first session and a very short break. We recognize we're running slightly behind schedule, but we're going to try to get you to lunch no later than 1:15, because we do want our speakers to have time to do their presentations and also a few moments for questions from you all in the audience. This session is a nice follow-on to this morning's discussion of social justice. We're going to dig into the concept of sharing research as a public good. And for those of you who have been steeped in the open access movement since its inception in 2002, this concept will be very familiar. The Budapest Open Access Initiative, which helped define the concept of open access, noted in part that an old tradition and a new technology have converged to make possible an unprecedented public good. The old tradition is the willingness of scientists and scholars to publish the fruits of their research in scholarly journals without payments for the sake of inquiry and knowledge. As we'll see through the presentations today, the concept of research as a public good has a very specific meaning. It signals that scientific knowledge, once generated, should be considered a benefit that's available to everyone, and that one person's use of knowledge does not diminish its availability to others. It signals that essentially the benefits of scientific discoveries are widely shared and considered a collective asset for society, justifying public funding for research and open access to scientific information. We have three wonderful speakers today that I'll just introduce briefly in turn as they come out, and please look at their bios in detail in the conference program. Our first speaker is a virtual presentation from Dr. Megha Sood, who is the Senior Science Officer for the International Science Council. Megha, the virtual podium is yours.
Thanks very much, Heather, and thank you very much for inviting me to present virtually today. I've been watching the proceedings since yesterday, and there's such a sense of positiveness, of collaboration and enthusiasm. I feel quite sorry for myself for missing out, but I'm happy to at least present to you virtually. So I'm just going to quickly introduce ISC a little bit, even though I see several familiar faces. Some of you might not know us, but also hopefully this will give you a sense of why we approach our work the way we do. And then I'll take it from there. So for ISC, our vision really is to advance science as a public good. So we fit quite nicely into this panel. And this comes in no small part from the broader scientific community, as Heather just mentioned, that we have been trying to capitalize on this moment where we can really make reality this vision of science as a global public good. And that means that science is not just a source of beneficial and applicable knowledge, that it is freely available, accessible worldwide, and can be used by anyone and anywhere without preventing or impeding its use by others. And our mission is to be the global voice for science, and that's because of our members. So ISC's members are the national and regional academies and councils of science, but also the disciplinary unions and other scientific associations. And increasingly, we have Global Young Academy, regional and national young academies, but also other associations of early and mid-career researchers. We are a global organization, but we do have a regional presence. And this is important because we understand that there are global universal goals for the science systems, but they need to be contextualized regionally, sometimes nationally, and that the situations and priorities might differ. So we want to be able to work in different ways for different needs. So open access is really fundamental, and I say really open because I don't want to sound like I'm also talking about APC-based open access, but it's fundamental to our vision and most of our work, because when you start looking at how science systems can be more engaged and can serve public good, you very much quickly run up against the wall of the question of how we can share scientific knowledge. And I just want to remind everyone, since 2 days ago was Human Rights Day, that actually the right to participate in and benefit from science is a universal human right. And so we have very solid basis to be able to promote what we're doing here and trying to forward Diamond Open Access. Unfortunately, this particular right is not very well understood or applied. States' obligations regarding the right to participate in benefit in science have been neglected compared to other rights. And the implications for scientists, including the fundamental existence of the right and the awareness of the existence of this right, is largely overlooked even by the global scientific community. So just a reminder that we actually have very solid basis to move on this. So ISC's vision is detailed in a paper of Science as a Global Public Good. And already here we're talking not just about science serving global public good, but also the fact that openness of science is actually important for the integrity and quality of science itself. So science cannot serve global public good without being open, because also for the benefit of science systems and how science is produced and shared, that's central questions for researchers across the world. In this paper, there are already two major impediments to formal communication of science as global public good. And the first is, of course, the business models that exist, including those based on APCs and transformative deals that create barriers to access for either authors or readers or both, which prevent the potential of the digital revolution to enhance the penetration and rate of circulation of scientific knowledge. The second impediment noted in that paper is the requirement of many journals that authors surrender their copyright as a condition of publication. And this privatizes what is often a publicly funded element. And this is becoming even more important in the light of mass sale of articles to AI companies now. So it's something that needs urgent attention. So in thinking through why we do what we do at ISC and what kind of work we engaged in, we've been thinking about how to enhance the public value of science. For science to serve public good, we have to be more engaged socially, and social justice has to be at the center of how we operate. And this relates more broadly to areas like trust in science, how to deal with disinformation, misinformation, which all bring us back to the question of how we can access and share scientific knowledge. So we've been working with our members to both understand and then enable and extend scientific engagement. And what we're learning, these are just two examples of reports available on that, but what we're learning across the board there includes that we need to enable scientists, researchers, science institutions to be more responsively engaged. So not just respond when there is misinformation, but to build these long-term collaborative relationships. We need to build trustworthiness in science systems. So not just trust in science, but trustworthiness of science systems. And that means how inclusive, how open, how diverse are our science institutions, how much can researchers actually engage in the kind of processes that require building these new open systems, because if they're not assessed according to it, if they're incentivized for it, if systems are not built to support that, that becomes quite difficult. So research institutions need to be actively supporting the change that we need in these dynamic contexts that we are working in today. And that we need to change the way we incentivize scientists. And that there needs to be bidirectional learning. This we've heard already in the previous panel and also yesterday, that scientists need to be engaged with other knowledge systems, other ways of knowing and sharing. And so our systems need to be far more flexible and far more open to innovation. And finally, context is key. And here, again, if we don't engage with social, political, economic context, a lot of what we produce is not impactful and is not usable. And again, here we come back to the questions of bibliodiversity, of linguistic diversity, of being really incentivized to do things in a way that are more engaged. So all this has made us believe now that the focus of our work should be not just on what we produce with science, but how we produce it. The process of science is just as important and needs as much attention as the outcome, in order for that outcome to be serving public good. So we're calling that flipping the science model, turning really our gaze to how we can do this kind of engaged, impactful, action-oriented science. And we're going to be launching a few pilot models early next year and then a few more later in the year, really to the goal of what speaker on the previous panel said, testing these models so that we can actually map all the obstructions that we have, all the obstacles that we have to deal with. And Diamond serves as a good sort of lighthouse of, if we can achieve that and be able to have engaged science systems behind what we're publishing, that would be really a good win. But we have to be able to operationalize already to really understand what the big obstacles are and how we can overcome them. So we also have some work specifically on the future of scientific publishing. And that's because this is a major priority for most of our members. So in 2019 at the General Assembly, our members adopted as a main priority for ISC to look at the future of scientific publishing and how it can enhance access issues, integrity of science, and the quality of science, because the current system doesn't serve authors or readers. And so we've been engaged in looking at, of course, providing resources for our members in the broader community, ranging from broader landscape studies, looking at what are the various elements we need to target, what is the state of the debates, but also specifically working on the normalization of preprints. We had a campaign for this to look at how we can enable preprints as a pathway to open, not as a silver bullet, but to spread awareness of the use of preprints in different disciplines across the world. We've also been working on looking at how open science can strengthen research integrity and what kind of business model options exist and what are the pros and cons of various business options. So these are just resources that are available on our website. But one of the key resources that we have at the moment is the key principles for scientific publishing that our members adopted universally in 2021. And these range from they should be universal open science for both authors and readers, to they should be concurrent access to data and observations. There needs to be respect for regional differences and bibliodiversity, and that the science community should be at the center of governing this new evolving systems. And this is really a key point for us to look at the governance issues related to how we publish, because often we see that the commercial publishers set the rules and then we are scrambling to see how to respond and make it better for us. But really, community-based publishing is what we want to be able to progress in. So the questions of sustainability of community infrastructure and community solutions is something that we want to engage more deeply in. And we've learned that very closely linked to publication issues is the question of research evaluation and researcher assessment. So along with the Inter-Academy Partnership and the Global Young Academy, we've been working on understanding what is the landscape, what are the key issues, but also what are our members doing, what are the key innovations that they're trying in reforming research evaluation, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and what are the common learnings. And of course, we've learned that there are certain innovations that are at tipping point that need institutional support, that we don't need to start from scratch, and we should be learning from each other to avoid blank slate paralysis. But also very importantly, that research assessment needs to be more broadly spread, and issues concerning mobility of researchers when they come from different kinds of research assessment contexts is a key concern for this area of work. So there's plenty of areas for reform. We are already working on some of them, and they're all linked somehow to Diamond. So Diamond being the goal we want to work towards, we all know that there's a whole machine and all the parts of it need to move together to be able to change the system. But we also want to work with others who adhere to our 8 principles and are working in these areas of reform to be able to help support some of those solutions that might be at tipping point. So we've been talking to several of you in the room actually, and different kinds of stakeholders, because we feel that coordinated action and information sharing at this point is necessary, because people are working on different parts of the puzzle, and we need something of a coming together of visions and understanding of where we are at on different parts of the problem. And so we've been talking to different stakeholders to understand how we can support some of that work, both in making progress in the reform in publishing, but also in research assessment. So some of you might have already seen that pyramid from NOSEC that we've been using to chart and talk with participants. This is not an exhaustive list. It's just an example of the kind of organizations and people that we've been talking to try and understand where are the levers, what are the common priorities, and what can we be doing together so that all of our work comes together into a big whole for systems change. And the common priorities that we've seen from surveys with our partners, the first priority is to ensure better access to science and reforming the business model. And there I would say Diamond, therefore, is at the top of that priority list. The other is to have open data as a fundamental principle of science, to reform assessment systems that should not be based on bibliometrics, to reform peer review to make it more efficient and effective, and to address governance issues, standards and principles that should be set and accountable to the scientific community. So I want to leave you with something that would be best done in person, but as a sorry substitute. We'd like, in the spirit of this action-oriented collegial atmosphere that you have there, to leave you with ideas of how we could help support this community and be an effective member of this community. So we could help with preparing resources that are needed for collective action. So gathering expertise, hosting deliberations, drafting consultative studies. This is something that the ISC Secretariat does quite often. We have a broad network of experts and members. And so this is something that we could be active participants in. We could provide space for sounding ideas, testing innovation with our diverse membership, and they're diverse both in terms of course, geographical location, but also disciplinary spectrum, research career stage. So we do have several different stakeholder groups within our membership. And of course, facilitating the kind of collaboration and coordination of like-minded stakeholders to enable science as a public good. It's something that we've started this year to do at a more global scale, but we'd like to be able to put more effort and resources into that next year. So during your discussions there, do know that we are there with you in spirit, and do think of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megha. That was wonderful. We really appreciate you reminding us just how deeply the International Science Council centers the concept of science as a public good as a key operating construct, and also for reinforcing that openness and open is a critical enabling strategy to really achieve the vision of making research a public good. Our next speaker is well known to all of us, and it is my pleasure and my privilege to introduce Professor Ariana Becerril Garcia, the Executive Director of Redalyc and the Chair of Amelica. Ariana.
My presentation is going to be in Spanish. I hope it's okay. I will try to make it slow, but I don't promise. Okay. Quisiera comenzar esta presentación, sé que solo tengo 20 minutos, déjeme poner aquí un poquito con una pequeña historia, una historia personal, como nos decía la doctora que dio la conferencia inicial el día de ayer, somos personas y tenemos historias, y a partir de las historias es que construimos en lo laboral. Y esta historia tiene que ver con una comunidad donde yo vivo. Es una comunidad que está muy cerca a lo que para los colegas que vienen de América, del continente americano, quiero decir, tendrán más familiaridad con la carretera panamericana. La carretera panamericana es un concepto o es una idea que se dio en una visión muy en línea con uno de los libertadores más grandes de nuestro continente, Simón Bolívar, que buscaba una América unida, ¿no? Y era esta idea de tener un paso libre desde Alaska hasta Argentina. Esto es real, de hecho a principios del siglo pasado es que esta carretera fue construida. Y desafortunadamente, durante la etapa neoliberal en México en particular, justo un pequeño tramo que aparece ahí fue privatizado. Ese es justo el tramo donde ahora yo vivo. Estos terrenos para construir esta carretera fueron donados por las comunidades indígenas que viven alrededor de este lugar. Y durante la época neoliberal en México fue cedido a una empresa comercial y le fueron concedidos descuentos y exenciones de pago a la comunidad indígena que vive alrededor. Esto fue muy desafortunado. Las comunidades de los que vivimos ahí aún pasamos libremente. Sin embargo, la comunidad que pasa libremente es muy reducida, solo la que está cercana. Incluso los hijos, nietos, bisnietos y todos los descendientes de los que donaron los terrenos originalmente ya no pasan libremente por ahí. Además que ese tramo corta justamente la idea de tener una América libre, de poder transitar libremente por una carretera que cruzara todo el continente. Pongo este ejemplo porque actualmente lo que vemos es una exclusión de las comunidades más vulnerables que incluso construyeron y donaron su patrimonio para construir esto, pero además porque demuestra que la privatización de los bienes públicos no genera mayor eficiencia. Nos han vendido la idea o nos han tratado de imponer la idea de que cuando privatizamos algo resulta en mayor eficiencia, mayor calidad. Todo eso es falso. Ahora tengo que hacer filas para poder transitar por la caseta de peaje de esta autopista, pero además se perdió el beneficio universal. Si una persona que venga de la Patagonia quiere pasar por México, tendrá que pagar, cuando antes era un beneficio universal. Esto mismo nos está pasando con la ciencia y con la privatización de pequeños pedazos, pero muchos pedazos del circuito de generación de conocimiento. Por eso es muy importante centrar nuestras discusiones en las cosas importantes, en las raíces de los problemas, en la comercialización, en lo que se está privatizando de los bienes públicos, en las pérdidas que estamos teniendo, en particular en el diamante, pero en general en la privatización de la ciencia. Los mitos alrededor de la eficiencia, la calidad, el prestigio son absolutamente dañinos cuando hablamos de los comunes. Y existen daños colaterales muy graves cuando nosotros dejamos de hablar de bienes públicos y de bienes comunes y hablamos en el lenguaje comercial. ¿Qué perdemos cuando nos insertamos en la lógica del mercado comercial? Muchas veces escucho decir en este tipo de foros, es que es una cuota razonable. No, el tema no son las cuotas, el tema es hablar de un paradigma comercial, de un bien público, coarta muchas posibilidades, como por ejemplo la construcción de infraestructura nacional, como por ejemplo la capacidad de decidir el propio futuro de las comunidades, de construir a partir de los intereses, de las necesidades de las comunidades y para las comunidades. Y también la capacidad de controlar y la toma de decisiones, la no subordinación a el diseño de soluciones en la ciencia que están hechas con otros intereses. Actualmente, y no quiero ser pesimista, ahora, esta es mi etapa pesimista, ahora seré optimista un poco más tarde. Creo que la ciencia abierta nos está fallando para hacer esta transición de la comercialización hacia los bienes públicos. Si no ponemos el foco en la construcción de bienes públicos, particularmente digitales, estamos perdiendo la gran oportunidad que la ciencia abierta nos está poniendo en la mesa. No se trata acerca de tener más artículos científicos, se trata acerca de la inclusión, se trata de la equidad, se trata del progreso, se trata de dar oportunidades a los que no las tenían. De eso se trata la ciencia abierta. Y si tenemos eso en mente, construiremos cosas distintas a las que estamos construyendo ahora. En el mercado comercial, las revistas son marcas de prestigio. Muchas veces escucho que la calidad y el prestigio se duda cuando hablamos de las revistas Diamante y entonces se busca hablar del prestigio en las revistas Diamante. No se trata de buscar el prestigio de las revistas Diamante, se trata de dejar de pensar en el prestigio y buscar la ciencia para que fue creada. Muchos de estos conceptos se han discutido el día de hoy, pero sí es importante pensar que dentro de los conceptos y la terminología comercial, el acceso abierto diamante pensado como bien público no tiene lugar. Nosotros no podemos hablar de prestigio, nosotros no podemos hablar de si estamos indexados o no en Web of Science o Scopus, porque es contradictorio. Muchas revistas dicen, soy una revista diamante. Empiezo a hablar más lento. Es que es muy difícil porque hay mucha pasión de por medio. Es muy difícil pensar desde el paradigma de los bienes públicos con los conceptos de un paradigma comercial. Eso es un poco lo que quiero decir. Y sobre todo, algo pasó con mi presentación. Sí. Ahora, ya estoy. No, es que quería volver a empezar. Quizá fui muy rápido. Ok, entonces temas como la internacionalización, el prestigio, la calidad, me parece que desvían la conversación importante, ¿no? El problema radica en el modelo de negocio, el problema radica en los valores que queremos alcanzar. Cuando hablamos de medir la ciencia, de monitorear la ciencia abierta, lo que hay que pensar es qué queremos observar, qué queremos lograr y por lo tanto qué podemos hacer. Si lo que queremos lograr es inclusión, entonces hay que medir la inclusión y entonces hay que hacer herramientas para la inclusión. Si queremos medir solo tener más artículos en acceso abierto, pues entonces seguiremos firmando big deals y seguiremos pagando APCs, porque lo que se quiere es solamente tener un artículo en abierto. Ahora escucho mucho que el problema radica en el concepto llamado revista. Quizás sí, el concepto llamado revista sea mejorable. Y hay propuestas que ahora dicen que pues, está bien, hay que mirar hacia los preprints o hacia otros formatos. Está bien, cada formato tiene su valor, su contribución, pero ese no es el punto. No deberíamos estar discutiendo la pelea entre formatos. Los formatos tienen su propio sentido. Son los modelos de negocio. Y si no nos centramos en los modelos de negocio, estaremos en 10 años, en un evento parecido, hablando sobre una crisis inflacionaria para acceder a los preprints. Y no queremos eso, queremos hablar de la raíz del problema. Las revistas, por lo tanto, como marcas, causan un problema y causan un problema de las revistas embudo. La industria del publica o perece nos ha llevado a saturar revistas con grandes cantidades de artículos, nos ha llevado a una crisis de la revisión por pares, porque los investigadores están orientados a publicar en los primeros cuartiles de las bases de datos comerciales. Y eso causa una presión dentro de los sistemas de revisión por pares. La pregunta es si el problema es en los procesos de revisión por pares o el problema es causado por precisamente esta jerarquización, este ranking de revistas basado en estrategias que orientan hacia saturar los procesos de revisión por pares. Entonces, cuando hablamos que las revistas son el problema, quizá las revistas como marcas son el problema, quizá la jerarquización a través del factor de impacto, ese sí que es el problema. Se necesita mucha voluntad para crear, sostener y reconocer a las revistas diamante, reconocerlas por su contribución. Se necesita tener la mentalidad de crear bienes públicos cuando diseñamos plataformas, cuando diseñamos tecnologías, cuando diseñamos políticas, cuando diseñamos sistemas de incentivos. Se tiene que tener en mente el bien público. Cuando yo creo una plataforma pensando en el bien público, el algoritmo tiene que ser acorde a eso. Y no entonces estamos pensando quizá en cobrar una parte del proceso desde el diseño. El bien público viene desde el diseño. Y entonces conseguimos que el acceso abierto se busque como el bien público y no como las estrategias actuales, en donde tenemos el acceso abierto comercial, en donde se consigue el acceso abierto, no importa el costo, donde se consigue el acceso abierto, no importa quién se quede atrás. Y muchas estrategias son así, de las que desafortunadamente vemos. o conseguir el acceso abierto no importando las implicaciones futuras. Esto no puede ser así. Pero ¿dónde estamos como pensando en el bien público? Es decir, ¿en dónde nos encontramos? Bueno, al final lo que deberíamos, como lo dije, estar midiendo es el progreso, el desarrollo, el beneficio de la sociedad, el si estamos salvando vidas o no, en fin. Y quizá hay que regresar un poquito a la esencia, y quizá hay que regresar a Merton, y quizá hay que regresar a estas condiciones, al ethos de la ciencia, a partir de la ciencia abierta, y ver cómo la ciencia abierta nos habilita el conocimiento para que sea universal, para que la comunidad tenga un rol, para organizar este escepticismo que la ciencia debe de llevar, para que sea objetivo el desinterés, y cómo los bienes públicos y cada uno de estos resultados que propone UNESCO en las recomendaciones de ciencia abierta pueden convertirse en bienes públicos digitales. No lo son en sí mismos, eso es muy importante decirlo. Un portal de revistas, una infraestructura no es un bien público digital solamente por tener revistas Diamante o por tener artículos en abierto. Tiene que pensarse para el bien público, tiene que pensar en la accesibilidad, en el multilingüismo, en que llegue a comunidades, por ejemplo, nuestros colegas cubanos que están aquí, que no pueden acceder a muchas herramientas por diferentes circunstancias. Entonces, ¿cómo hacemos para incluirlos, ¿no? De eso se tratan los bienes públicos. Entonces, eso es precisamente la oportunidad que nos brinda la ciencia abierta. Pero ¿dónde estamos? Como bien nos recordaba Maranda Cos, pues los costos de APC se han triplicado. Del 2013 al 2020. Esto a mí me parece que es casi inentendible cómo nuestros países adoptaron este modelo de negocio llamado APC inmediatamente, con una velocidad sin dudar. Y nuestros gobiernos pagan estos big deals sin dudar. Y en cambio tenemos que hacer estos congresos para deconstruir algo que no debimos haber aceptado desde un inicio, ¿no? No, deberíamos estar discutiendo cosas más interesantes y no estar discutiendo alrededor de un modelo que nosotros no inventamos, que ya existía el modelo Diamante, ya existía el modelo de bien público. Y este es un examen para ustedes, porque es un chiste, pero espero que quien lo entienda sea porque entendemos los bienes públicos. Este es un artículo que pregunta si la ciencia es un bien público y está publicado bajo un muro de pago, ¿no? Yo tengo la respuesta de eso. Evidentemente no es un bien público, ¿verdad? Este es otro ejemplo, un artículo que discute las contradicciones de la comercialización en la ciencia, pero que nos cuesta $26 por leerlo. Por supuesto que hay contradicciones en la ciencia, ¿no? Esto justamente nos verifica, pues ahí es donde estamos, justamente discutiendo el bien público con recursos cerrados. Estamos muy mal, ¿no? La ciencia como bien público, ya lo decía Heather, 5 minutos. Al final, las tecnologías nos habilitan que la ciencia realmente pueda ser un bien público. Pero hay que tomar acciones, hay que prevenir el APC, hay que reformar la evaluación, hay que invertir en infraestructura local, hay que diseñar políticas acorde a los bienes públicos, hay que fortalecer el acceso abierto no comercial para que logremos esta universalidad que es una condición de los bienes públicos. Y me voy a saltar un poquito esto para llegar, si me queda tiempo, regreso, pero hablar de la tragedia de los comunes aplicada al acceso abierto Diamante. Nuestras revistas de acceso abierto Diamante están muy cercanas al estatus de bienes públicos digitales. Las infraestructuras abiertas también están muy cercanas al concepto de bienes públicos digitales. Proveen un beneficio sin distingo universal, incluso a las personas, a los países, a las soluciones que no contribuyen a su sostenibilidad. ¿En qué radica la tragedia de los comunes? Radica en que un recurso común, un bien público, y seguramente Esther tiene mejores formas de decirlo que yo, que un bien público, si no es cuidado como bien público y es abusado, ¿no? Y no se contribuye a la sostenibilidad de ese bien público se degrada, ¿no? Y entonces, por ejemplo, hay 20% de los artículos publicados en las revistas latinoamericanas de acceso abierto Diamante, que no cobran a los autores, vienen de países fuera de América Latina, ¿no? Es un servicio que estas revistas ya están dando a otros países. Esto es muy bueno, es el beneficio universal que se busca. La pregunta es si se están sosteniendo colectivamente estas revistas, porque les aseguro que las revistas sufren muchas deficiencias casi heroicas para poder dar este servicio universal. Pero no solamente es una cuestión de geopolítica entre países, es una cuestión también de la interacción entre los servicios comerciales y los bienes públicos digitales. Les pongo un ejemplo, me quedan 3 minutitos, les pongo un ejemplo. En Redalyc damos el servicio de consulta del texto completo de los artículos de las revistas Diamante que indexamos. Nosotros queremos privilegiar que cualquier persona vaya y descargue libremente la información. Sin embargo, todos los días entro a los servidores y tenemos tenemos bots que extraen la información de nuestros servidores de soluciones de descubrimiento para bibliotecas comerciales, como EBSCO, Serial Solutions, ProQuest, ¿no? Recientemente un bot que tenemos, que le encanta a Redalyc, es chatgpt.com, ¿no? ChatGPT es todo el tiempo colectando la información de Redalyc. Estas empresas venden los servicios a las bibliotecas y a las instituciones y están degradando la capacidad de respuesta que tenemos desde Redalyc para el usuario final, porque nuestros servidores son limitados y entonces se saturan, muchas veces nuestros servidores pues no soportan esta carga y entonces son los bienes comerciales los que degradan lo que debería de ser un bien público. Y en esta inequidad hay muchos actores. Yo preferiría que las bibliotecas vengan directamente a las infraestructuras abiertas a consultar y no compren el contenido que está abierto a través de soluciones comerciales. Porque aunque ellos dicen que no lo cobran porque está abierto, en realidad están degradando los bienes públicos digitales llamados infraestructuras. Entonces, este desbalance muestra una inequidad en donde los que pierden y son menos competitivos son los bienes públicos, los que no cobran. Los que están brindando un mayor beneficio son los mayormente afectados. Es un desbalance muy difícil de corregir si no hay políticas, si no hay voluntades, si no hay una decisión firme de apoyar a las formas de comunicación académica y científica y educativa, porque hay una gran cantidad de estudiantes accediendo a estos bienes públicos, y una responsabilidad compartida de instituciones, gobiernos, bibliotecas, tomadores de decisiones. Todos debemos contribuir a tener un mejor reconocimiento y uso responsable de los bienes públicos y pensar en los bienes públicos al momento de cada paso que damos en nuestra actividad, tanto como académicos como científicos. Y bueno, me detengo aquí. Muchas gracias.
Ariana, thank you, as always, for the powerful reminder of just how deeply entrenched commercialism, the commercialization of knowledge and of science has become in our systems, and of the imperative that we have for really grabbing it by the roots to pull it out and to work collectively together to advance the system. I love the concept of public good by design, and Kate Thaney, where are you? You always say, that should go on a t-shirt, that should go on a t-shirt. So looking at you for that one. Our final speaker is also very well known to us in the community for her leadership in coordinating UNESCO's landmark Open Science recommendation. Please welcome Dr. Anna Pershik, Program Specialist for Science, Technology, and Innovation Policies and Open Science at UNESCO. Anna.
Thank you very much, Heather, for the introduction, and thank you all for being here today with us. It's always a little bit intimidating going after Ariana, right? So, bear with me. I will take you back a little bit higher up, a little bit towards the vision, where we want to be, where we would like to be, and that I think is a good thing in general. countries agree that they would like to be. So I think the open science recommendation and the idea of science as a global public good is something that the countries do aspire to. They do want to get there. The question is, how do we get there? How long does it take us? What are the different contexts that are out there that also need to be taken into account while we do this journey towards science as a global public good? And actually, if we have a look, and Mega talked about this before, we do have science as a human right. I mean, that is a big deal. It is something that is very important. It has been set out in 1948. So again, it's something that has been in the minds of men and women who have come up with the declaration a long time ago. And it is something that comes back regularly. It is true also that maybe unlike the other human rights, it is a human right that hasn't received so much attention for quite a long time, because for a long time science was seen a little bit like a luxury, something on top of education, on top of other rights that we can have. So it was seen as something maybe not as a priority. But as we move in this world that becomes more and more dependent on technology, dependent on science, that is shaped by science more and more, the return to this Universal Declaration of Human Rights and to the need to promote science as a global public good and as a human right becomes more and more important. We have seen also in the international discourse that science is becoming also kind of critical to the development discussion, which again was not the case in the past. And with the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, all the goals that are in the science agenda depend on science and need to be enabled by science. There is a special chapter in what we call the Addis Ababa also declaration for sustainable development, which talks about enablers and drivers for science sustainable development, and it has a huge chapter on science, technology, innovation. So again, a recognition of the need that science needs to be for all and that it needs to benefit all. The Pact for the Future that has been just approved by the United Nations also in September further affirms this need to have science really as a public good, in particular through digital public goods. Now, in terms of normative instruments, so legal kind of frameworks that kind of affirm science as a global public good, we have in UNESCO developed the 2017 Recommendation on Science and Scientific Researchers, which recognizes the significant value of science as a common good. And it's very interesting because that little paragraph actually talks about the promotion of science as a public good. To promote science as a public good, member states should encourage and facilitate access to knowledge, including open access. So basically, in this recommendation, which was first adopted in '74 and then kind of redone in 2017, adapted in 2017, the hook between science as a common good and open science has been done in that particular paragraph. And that was actually also one of the grounds upon which we have then developed the recommendation on open science, kind of saying, listen, in the broader recommendation on science and scientific researchers, you member states are talking about open access and access to knowledge. Let's go further and more deeper into that, and let's see how that can actually be accomplished. So the recommendation on open science really does put open science at the heart of science as a global public good. But what it really does is that it provides these common values that need to be used so that we can indeed have science or open science as global public good. And I think it's important to note that each and every of these values, so diversity, inclusiveness, quality, integrity, collective benefit, equity, and fairness, there is a little paragraph for each of these values that describes what it means, and it has been negotiated by 193 member states. So it's not just the words that some experts have put together or scholars. it is something that really the member states have actually thought about, discussed, negotiated, and that they should be standing behind as well. And I think this is the power of this recommendation is also in that, and please feel free to use it, because your governments have actually adopted it, and it can be a leverage to what you are trying to promote also in your communities. And in particular, under the collective benefit, we defined it as a global public good. Open science should belong to humanity in common and benefit humanity as a whole. To this end, scientific knowledge should be openly available and its benefits universally shared. And it goes even further than that to say that the practice of science should be inclusive, sustainable, and equitable, also in opportunities for scientific education and capacity development. So the point is not just to say we need access to the products of science, it is that there is need for access to the process of science. So we were talking a lot about the decolonization of science and knowledge. We also talk a lot about democratization of science and scientific knowledge. And I think these are some of the powerful points of this recommendation as well that need to be used in the context of the promotion of Diamond Open Access. Another thing I think that is important is that the recommendation also says open access alone, open access to scientific publication alone will not be enough to implement open science as a concept, will not be enough to have open science as a public good. There is need for other parts of the puzzle, other parts also to be put in place. So besides open scientific knowledge, which includes publications, data, educational resources, open source software and source code, and also open hardware, we also need to think about open science infrastructures, open engagement of societal actors, and the open dialogue with other knowledge systems. So open science can only reach its full potential if we reach openness in all of these different parts. And if we apply those values of open science to all of these different pillars of open science. Now, going back a little bit to what the recommendation says about open access to scientific knowledge, because besides giving the values and principles, this definition, common definition of open science, it also gives a series of very concrete actions that different stakeholders should take. And in that context, there are several things that are particularly kind of tailored for open access and basically speak to Diamond Open Access, to open access to scientific publications, which is free of charge, both for readers and for authors, and that do not apply any article processing charges or book processing charges. So among those different actions that are mentioned there is one that there is a need to consider science as a global public good, and in that sense, the services of open science should be viewed as essential research infrastructures governed and owned by community and funded collectively by governments, funders, and institutions. Another very important part, and that was discussed a lot in the intergovernmental context, is the need to have more bibliodiversity and also to support not-for-profit academic and scientific community-driven publishing models as a common good. And as I said, ensure diversity, open, transparent, and equitable access, supporting non-commercial publishing models and collaborative publishing models without APCs. So indeed, the Diamond Open Access as a model is perfectly aligned with the UNESCO recommendation on open science. At the same time, I think everybody who was at the table negotiating the recommendation also realized that the switch cannot be from one day to another. So there has to be a process, there has to be a time where one learns how to make sure that the Diamond Open Access or the open access that we want is truly open and that it doesn't have some unintended negative consequences on the entire community. So a period of kind of transition was always something that people had envisaged. Now the question is, how do we actually manage this period of transition and make sure that it doesn't bring us backwards rather than bringing us forward. Now, as we saw that Diamond is indeed aligned with the recommendation, we tried to have a look at, so how much of Diamond Open Access do we have around the world, and who is benefiting from Diamond Open Access? So we've published this Open Science Outlook. Please have a look at it if you can. This data comes actually from COCI, and I saw somebody here. So if you have any questions about the data, she's right there. I'm not going to take those questions. So in the study that we've done with the data provided, globally, only around 12% of publications are in Diamond Open Access. And if we go to the different regions, and these are the regions according to the United Nations classifications, we actually see Latin America benefiting in a way, yes, from Diamond Open Access a lot. But if you look at the others, really the numbers are not great. If you look at Sub-Saharan Africa, only 9% of publications are in Diamond Open Access. That means that the researchers and public in Sub-Saharan Africa, for 90%, still pays something to be able to read or publish their articles and their knowledge. The same is also with Asia and Pacific, even Western Europe and North America, of course. And these numbers may have changed in the past because there has been a push for Diamond, but this is more or less the picture that we are working with right now. Now, trying to understand how we can better support this movement of Diamond Open Access across the world, and building on the first summit that we had on Diamond Open Access in Toluca last year, and building a little bit on the conversations of that summit, we've launched this global consultation on Diamond Open Access to understand better, is there a need for a better coordination, collaboration, mechanisms to be able to connect better those who are doing Diamond Open Access, those who want to do Diamond Open Access, at which level these coordination mechanisms should happen, and how, just to have a feeling for the community and what the needs might be. So we launched this consultation in July. It is still open until the 15th of January. We will still keep it open if we feel that we have still not heard from everybody that we wanted to hear from. These are the QR codes. It's in different languages, so you feel free, please, to do the survey while we are speaking even now. And just some preliminary results that are coming up. First is really that there is interest. We have some 1,200 respondents already, with the majority of responses coming from Latin America, then Europe, North America, Asian Pacific, Africa, and Arab region. And we do still see that Asia Pacific, Africa, and particularly Arab region, we need more. We need more responses. We are hoping to get some more, targeting a little bit more, I'm looking at Emily as well, targeting a little bit more the region and making sure that we get those responses from there as well. We'll try also to maybe see a little bit better which countries in particular we are talking about as well, so to have a little bit of a more in-depth analysis of these responses. A broad range of different responders, but one thing that actually struck me a lot is that these are the communities that work not only on Diamond, that work on open access in general and on open science. These are our networks that work on these different issues. 50% of them said that they are not really familiar with Diamond Open Access. And I think this is, yes, it can be frustrating, but this is the reality. So a lot of work to be done still to build capacity, to explain to people what it is, whether is it in our communities, the communities that we talk to, or even more with the broader communities, including the policymakers or the funders. So we need to do more in terms of communication around Diamond Open Access. We've also seen from the responses that there is a general support. Again, these are not final results, so it might change as we receive more input. There is a general support for a global collaborative framework for Diamond Open Access, but really there was an emphasis on prioritizing flexible coordination and accommodating diverse regional contexts. So really flexibility, respect for regional diversity, these are some of the things that really came up very strongly, and the need for further consultations, need to talk more with the actors in different regions about what the needs are, who is doing what, connections between them. So we'll keep on exploring and trying to understand better what the needs are. Again, as I said yesterday, also to understand what the role of UNESCO may be in this area. For us, I think the most important thing is how to give more visibility to the Diamond Open Access movement and how to ensure that it has more impact, because it really is at the heart of promoting open science and therefore also at the heart of promoting science as a global public good that Arianna really and Mega talked about so eloquently. So just to finish on this, we will gather all these different inputs, probably have an online presentation of the final results and a discussion with everybody to understand what the next steps might be. To finish the presentation, what I would like to also remind you is that to shift to open science and to be able to really respect all of these different values of open science, we kind of transformed the Nosek pyramid into this virtuous cycle. There is need for a cultural shift, and there is really need to do many different things within the entire system. So we are talking about putting in place policies, we are talking about providing incentives or changing incentives when we talk about research assessments, we are talking about building capacities, ensuring that the infrastructures are in place, that the funding is also in place. But one important part is also that we look into monitoring. Arianna was talking about this before. If we want to have open science, if we want to have science as a global public good, what does that mean in terms of what do we monitor for science? How do we monitor progress towards that science as a global public good? We obviously cannot use the same metrics that we are using now. So what is the metrics that we should be using? What are the questions that we should be asking ourselves so that we can provide this framework for monitoring? And here also we were very happy in a way to have had the government of France who started pushing for like a global initiative around monitoring of open science. We've partnered with them, brought along a lot of different other partners. So now this Open Science Monitoring Initiative has been launched. We've launched the consultation for on some of the global principles for the monitoring of open science. The consultation has just been closed, so we will be looking into the results and presenting the results. But if you are interested in this conversation around the monitoring principles and monitoring of open science, the new monitoring framework, please join the initiative. There's going to be working groups, and we will be very, very happy to continue this conversation with you, because we do need this framework for monitoring to know what we want to monitor and also to see what progress we are making towards this vision of open science as a public. And thank you very much for that. This is just a little bit of publicity.
Thank you so much for that talk, Anna, and not only for your talk, but also your incredible leadership in coordinating the consultation and the recommendations on open science. We want to have Mega join us as well, I think. Can we get Mega on the screen? Great. And we'll speak into the microphone for people at home. Please come up to the microphones, and we have a few moments for questions.
Yes, my name is Chinwe Angunobi. I'm from Nigeria, the National Library of Nigeria. have a very serious thinking problems. I want to present this scenario. UCT has a repository. It has a team of reviewers reviewing research output from this university and from maybe surrounding institutions that may want them to review for them. And they include it in their repository, include those that pass the test, review test, they include them in the repository. And then here is the publisher in Cape Town who has a journal and engage some reviewers to review the articles, maybe from researchers from University of Cape Town. And then the publisher, if they passes the test, the publisher publishes the article in a journal, while UCT puts its article in the repository and then makes it open. What is the place of the publisher in this scientific output? Why I'm asking this, I have tried to look at some open monograph publishing platforms, and many of them are using platforms like DSpace, Customize, and they're publishing there. So my question is, we started with the green access, green open access, we moved to gold, which you pay some money, and then we are moving now to diamond. Why in the green, you do not pay anything, and it's not everything that is produced in the institution that goes to the repository? Why can't we leave this publisher out? That's my question.
Thank you. Would anyone like to respond? Ariana?
I would like to, in Spanish or in English? Thank you for the question. Actually, it's totally important to integrate green and diamond. I think it's the perfect equation that allows public good. Actually, in Latin America, we are working with a high-level collaboration between the main network of institutional repositories, La Referencia and Redalyc, from the diamond part. So I should say that, Diamond is very willing to populate institutional repositories and help repositories to capture back all the scientific output that has been published in Diamond Open Access journals, which is something that is very difficult in the gold approach. So I think green and diamond should definitely work together.
Thank you, Ariana. We're going to take these two questions and then just the three there, if you can be as brief as you can with the questions, because we do need to break for lunch at a reasonable time. So, yes.
So I will ask my question partly in Spanish, so those who are using headsets, they can put them on. I will try to speak slowly to avoid having the interpreter's blood pressure go up. So. Primero quería agradecerles a las panelistas, las presentaciones fueron muy interesantes, y agradecerte en particular, Ariana, por resituar el problema que estamos discutiendo como un problema fundamentalmente político. Porque me parece que si bien las relaciones de poder que vemos en estas discusiones se despliegan a través de dispositivos tecnocientíficos y tecnolegales, fundamentalmente estamos hablando de un problema de relaciones de poder muy desiguales. Y me gustaría tener tu perspectiva sobre cómo podemos hacer para introducir este tipo de abordaje de lectura política en los sistemas de ciencia, tecnología e innovación. Now I'm switching to English. Anna alluded to the need to really revisit and fundamentally revise how we understand science, technology, and innovation frameworks. the kinds of discussions that we're having here, I think we can have them in this space. And I'm delighted that we had Dr. Linda yesterday to kind of bring us back to the basics and to what we need to be thinking about. But when we go back into government spaces or into mainstream policy and research spaces, it's very difficult to not get sucked into these kind of techno-scientific and techno-legal discussions when the discussion is really political. So any clues or leads that you can provide in this regard would be very helpful.
Mega, would you like to respond at all to that? I want to make sure you're part of the conversation.
Thanks, Heather. I don't know if I have a very helpful answer, but I do want to say that this has been, to me, this is really the key benefit of spaces like this, is that we can have these conversations and call out the political relations of power that are really the need to address is really there. And so really speaking about just digital divides, etc., it doesn't work unless you address the divides and why those exist. To me, one of the major levers that we really need to pay more attention to are funders, because there are some funders that are willing to put resources into developing the kind of solutions that we already know exist, but just aren't sustainable because they don't have the resources to continue and to expand. So for me, that's one of the key levers that we need to pay more attention to, is looking for those funders who might put the money where the solutions are. And also not to be afraid to call out what the problem really is. And like the person who asked the question, it's really a political problem. So we need to have discussions about power relations. Thanks.
Thanks, Mega. Ariana, did you want to, or Anna?
Yeah, no, just
Ariana's going to put a slide up while you talk, just so.
So no, I just wanted to say, we actually have a lot of governments who come to us to seek assistance with the development of their policies. So very often, it's not only a question of political will. Sometimes it really is a question of capacities. They look in the recommendation, they said, this is really great. We know that the first thing to do is to have some kind of policy. Where do we even start? And then we start talking, and we realize that there is so much that they can learn, and not just policymakers, also all the other kind of parts of the science system that needs to learn about open science, about what is out there, what is not, what are the implications of the different ways to do open science. It's relatively new in that particular space and in the policy space. So there is also a need to maybe think about really how do we, as I said, communication, how do we communicate better to these different stakeholders? How do we put them in the room together so that they talk to each other? For the recommendation, one interesting thing is that the countries that have adopted it, they also kind of committed every 4 years to present a report on the implementation of the recommendation. Okay, so we had just sent a survey to them because the 4 years period is going to end now, and in 2025 we are actually asking for their reports back. In the reporting, what we really are asking them, then we'll see how much they will do it, is that they actually build national coordination committees where they would bring together different stakeholders to talk about open science, to see who knows what, who is doing what, where the challenges are. We don't want this to be one person in the ministry just, responding to the questions. So hopefully also through those dialogues, there is going to be a little bit more capacity building to then take the right decisions based on the right evidence and based on the right information that decision makers actually have.
Ariana, are you all set, or do you need more time? Okay.
Yes, thank you. And I think this question because I skipped a couple of very important slides. And as Esther mentioned in the morning, I think it's very simple. We only need to make a decision. We need a political decision in order to make it happen. It only takes that. These, for me, are some of the strategies to develop local infrastructure and to strengthen Diamond to own and control. But also, very importantly, to think that neutrality is not good in this scenario. So we need to really decide and have the will to do it, and that's it. And I'm very glad, and this is, I forgot this, it's unforgivable. So to include this, if you are, neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of oppressor. So it's easy for me. It takes will, and with that we can start from that.
Thank you. We're going to go to Mamita and then one more. Joe and Sarah, can I beg your indulgence and ask, we'll arrange to make sure that your questions get into the record and that you have time. Thank you so much. Mamita.
Okay, yeah, thank Heather and thank both of you. So I have two questions I will ask very quick and addressing. First one is addressing to Ariana. So just now the slide you showed, and I have something very similar to that to ask you, because how do you see digital object identifier? Because I think that's one of the things that's also pushing the diamond model back. And this is where can we really be apolitical, be neutral? Because we know that for both DataCite and Crossref, it's very expensive. So our preprint repositories cannot afford it. So again, it's probably maybe not an elephant-sized problem, but a problem that we need to address. So how do you think we can go about this? And Anna, my question towards you was that you were showing what are the uptakes of diamond open access in various parts of the world. Let me take just to the sub-Saharan context. I mean, it's very clear that the people there, the researchers there are, not, even if they're publishing in gold model, of course they cannot afford it. It's coming from somewhere. For example, Research for Life. Now, how do you see this kind of initiative? Are they prohibitive towards the diamond model? Because if we keep on giving incentive to the commercial model or even some non-profit model, we would never make this diamond mainstream. So these are my two questions.
Thank you. It's a very important question. Well, I think that we need identifiers in order to connect information across the web. It's crucial to take advantage of the semantics and the benefits of semantic web and to have enriched services in the web. But it is important to notice that DOIs, are not the only solution. Actually, URIs is a technical concept that you can implement from various sources. There are also initiatives like the one developed by Referencia in blockchain, for example. So we need identifiers, yes. And I think the implementation of DOIs actually is, okay, we don't have this coverage in Diamond, but I think the problem is not with the DOIs itself, but with the platforms that are harvesting information only looking at DOIs, because they should look at the diversity of technical solutions that now are available for identifying resources uniquely.
Yeah, and very quickly, although it's a very difficult question, right? I was saying about a transition period, right? So there is a need for a transition. Research for Life has been fundamental for researchers in the South to actually access knowledge which is now beyond paywalls. While we still have this situation, it would be very, very difficult, again, from one day to another, without finding the proper solution for them to still have access to that knowledge, to take away some of these initiatives which are actually or have been providing access to knowledge for a very, very long time. So again, it's a question of conversations and understanding what the next steps are, what the roadmap is, and how in this whole transition period we still make sure that Research for Life initiative or something similar is still providing access to knowledge to countries from the South, or finding something similar again to ensure that access is there for those researchers who need it.
Thanks. Okay, we have one final question, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Ioko Iorao, in the spirit of biblio or linguistic and diversity, that was a greeting from my local dialect, Ekiti, in the Yoruba part of Nigeria. My name is Idowu. Now, I really appreciate your presentations. Should I hold on, Ariana? Oh, yes. All right. Can I continue? Yes. All right, yeah. So I want to start from the last speaker, and that's Dr. Pesik. You know, the statistics is mind-boggling, blowing rather. You know, with Africa having 48% of gold, open access journals, and that makes me to ask, is Africa the golden continent of, open access? So, and to also ask you, on the UNESCO recommendation, I happen to facilitate through a grant, a public discussion on the recommendations in my university, in my state, for researchers, and that was the first public engagement on the recommendation in Nigeria to the best of my knowledge. Now, is there a mechanism, that UNESCO is employing to enforce, that member states, go this route and adopt, these recommendations in their countries? All right, that's one. The other one for Ariana, I've never thought of it the way you brought it out to the fore, and that was wonderful, that there are players who are benefiting from the efforts we are all putting together to make things, science, be a public good. You have aggregators, putting all these things together and selling them back, to us researchers. It is quite unfair. Is there any advice, from you on what can be done? In fact, the way it is, it really pained me. It's like I want to recommend to Dr. Raju, as part of the declaration from Cape Town, that something should be done about this kind of, players, people who are benefiting from science, from diamond science, as public good. Something should be done about it, that you are making a declaration that we oppose, this kind of practice in totality, all right? And to Mega, thank you for your presentation. Of course, in the spirit of science as public good, you did recommend that there should be a shift. But how do we achieve this shift without going back to the basics, like the issue of research assessment, the issue of, all the policies from the institutions, putting demand and prayer on scholars to publish or perish? Thank you very much.
Ariana, would you like to start? And then we'll go to Anna and then to Mega.
Sure. Well, I think, as I said, and thank you for the question, is that it's very important to always focus on the beneficiaries of each decision and also who is being excluded. So to always put the focus on that when we, for example, hire a service or when we make any policies or incentives or in decision making, so to put the focus on the values, on the equity, inclusion, and not the focus on the practical results that sometimes mislead the conversations.
Very quickly also, so in terms of support from UNESCO for the implementation of the recommendations, I think one of my biggest frustrations is that after the recommendation was adopted, and it was really a big success, and everybody was very happy with it, the countries adopted it, unanimously, there was a consensus. There was no additional funds that came to UNESCO so that we can actually help countries to implement the recommendation. So we've asked, we talked to different donors and everything, but somehow, for a variety of reasons, that didn't happen. Having said that, we are committed, of course, to help those countries who come to us with requests for assistance, particularly when it comes to development of policies, and then also kind of the organization of the different structures for the implementation of such policies. Nigeria in particular has been very active and really took the recommendation and trying to figure out what are the things that they need to do. We have an office that is very active in the country that can that you can contact, and us also. But as I said, it's a kind of an ad hoc basis. When there is a demand, we try to find a partner who can partner with us, where we can provide funds and then assist the countries. Whereas my wish was that we really do it systematically, that we can do it in different places, that we can set up networks of countries that can work together on developing their policies, sharing information. Maybe it will still happen, but we'll have to work on some of the funding as well. The other question around the Diamond Open Access in Africa, I think there is several sessions also coming up after this one that will really look more deeply into those discussions. So I would suggest you to follow those, and I think you're going to get much more and much better responses from the speakers in those sessions around those issues.
Thanks, Anna. Mega, you have the last word.
Thank you. I hope that my intervention did speak about how we're thinking, what we need to change in how we do science to be able to move the discussion forward and to be able to shift systems. So really our power is that as researchers, we are the producers, the testers, the users of this knowledge, and that's no small power. But we need to be able to learn to do things differently and then address issues that come up. So universities, research institutions have a big part to play there, and definitely research assessments have are a big lever to change things, because if we are not being judged on where we publish, how much we publish, but what we are publishing and what impact that has, that will really incentivize us to be able to do the jobs we want to do, because nobody really gets into science hoping to be publishing so many papers in XYZ journals. We really want to do science for other reasons. So I don't think we should underestimate as researchers what our power is in this system. Thank you very much.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. Please join me in thanking Mega, Anna, and Ariana for a wonderful session.